In the fall of 1924, the public's interest in football was awakened by the sensational breakaway running of a University of Illinois halfback named Red Grange. He scored 4 touchdowns in 12 minutes in the first quarter against Michigan. It was the beginning of one of the most spectacular careers in sports history. During 13 years of high school, college, and professional football, Red Grange carried the ball 4,013 times for an average of 8.1 yards and scored 531 touchdowns. His astonishing record still stands today. Red Grange, the galloping ghost, became a football legend. But as so often happens over the years, Red Grange the man was almost forgotten, until a story from Central Florida made national headlines. Once again, sports fans and readers from coast to coast were reading about Red Grange. The news story developed when the Social Security Office in Lakeland, Florida, learned that the Mr. Harold Grange, who was 65 and eligible for Medicare, was none other than Red Grange, the galloping ghost of football fame. The Granges lead a quiet, semi-retired life at Indian Lake Estates, a small community in Central Florida. Since the story came out in the newspapers about Red Grange becoming 65, he has been busy answering the hundreds of letters he received from friends and fans. Social Security District Manager Bill Arnold hears Red Grange tell about how he got into college football.
And I really got in football in an odd way. I was a pledge at the Zeta Psi fraternity at Illinois. I remember that after about the first week, they lined all us pledges up against the wall, and they said, "What did you do in high school?" And this fellow might say I was cheerleader. They'd say, "You go out for cheerleader." They came to me and they said, "What did you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going out for track and basketball." They said, "You played football, didn't you?" Well, football is the big sport in college, of course, and I said, "Yes." They said, "You go out for football." I said, "No, I'm going, no." They said, "You go out for football." I went over to Illinois Field, and there must have been 300 freshmen out, Bill, and I turned around and went back. I said, "I don't have a chance over there." Well, they got a paddle down, you know, which we have in the fraternity houses, and there still is a hole in the wall where my head hit that wall. When they hit me with the paddle, I pretty much went through the wall, so I decided to go out for football. In my day, there were no scholarships of any kind. I worked in the summertime on the ice wagon, and it wasn't any joke. I worked hard, and I worked all during my high school career and all during my college career and 3 or 4 years in pro football.
Back in the early days of professional football, the player found it difficult to live on the pay he received as a football player. It was the spectacular playing of men like Red Grange that brought financial success to pro football. Working around the yard helps keep Red Grange in shape. He's still close to his playing weight of 170 pounds from over 40 years ago. He assured us that cutting flowers for Mrs. Grange was the lightest of his yard chores. Mrs. Grange has been a fan of her husband's since the day they first met. He was flying to a football game, and she was the airline stewardess aboard the tri-motor plane. Mrs. Grange reminded us that back in those days, a girl had to be a registered nurse before she could become an airline stewardess. The Grange name greets visitors who arrive by car or by boat. Rowing is another form of exercise that helps keep Red Grange in condition. Until recently, the Granges had been feeding a 4-foot alligator that swam up to the dock every morning. At times, the alligator would crawl out of the canal, onto the lawn, and make a hissing sound until someone came out to feed him. Needless to say, the Grange's dog, Rusty, kept his distance and seems glad that the alligator has gone elsewhere for his food. Now it's the fish who come around for a handout. This canal leads to a 20-square-mile lake, which has the longest freshwater pier in Florida. The highest tribute that can be paid to a professional football player is to be selected for the Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. Football's heroes of the past are honored here: Jim Thorpe, Bronco Nagurski, Otto Graham, Sammy Baugh, and Red Grange, among others. Red Grange was one of the first players to be chosen for the Hall of Fame. Another picture of Red Grange is on display in the exhibition rotunda. Here, the visitor can view a magnificent collection of mementos and pictures that relate to the history of professional football. George Halas, who recently retired as coach of the Chicago Bears, was a spectator at the game and had a few words to say about one of his former players.
Red Grange joined us immediately after his last collegiate game against Ohio State, and he played his first pro game on Thanksgiving Day of 1925. He was probably the most publicized player of all time, and yet he always conducted himself in a modest manner. He gave pro football the impetus that it needed so badly in 1925. I would really say that he was a maker of professional football because of what he added to us. And with it all, the size of his hat always remained the same. He was one of the finest personalities I've known. A fine, honest, modest young man. And today, he is still of the same type, I'm happy to say.
There's no visible evidence that this is the man who once spread terror across the gridiron and left thousands of screaming fans breathless from his spectacular plays. But his name will be remembered by football fans for years to come. And the story of Red Grange, the galloping ghost, will always be an exciting part of American football history. The attraction that football holds for millions of fans today is a tribute to the old-time pros like Red Grange, who helped make football the popular game it is today.